Hi everyone, welcome to Elevate 23. I am John Hu, and welcome to the masterclass talking about resource management. All right, so a little bit about myself. I was actually a Monday customer. Originally, I used to run an organization, a professional services organization that specialized in implementations of online software. And at any given time, we had like 50 projects running, and we had this problem where we just couldn't figure out where our resources were, where our project were, and we just had all these issues of just managing a large team of about 120 consultants. And we had all kinds of tools, but at the end of the day, we implemented Monday.com, and Monday connected all the tools together and gave us a top-down view of resources and where everything was, and that really just made a night-and-day difference. And that in turn made me said, oh my God, if Monday can do that for me, I need to start a company to do Monday projects. And that's what we are. So it's a funny name, Axanexa. Imagine there's two words in there. Imagine a dash right there between Axa and Nexa. It's hard to pronounce, I understand that, but we really wanted to capture this concept of automate anything. Monday is your perfect orchestration tool to tie together all kinds of different cloud-based services, all kinds of different data modules, all kinds of different systems that will allow you to create end-to-end workflows. And with those, we specialize in project, sales, legal processing, HR, marketing, all these types of business processes. We can help you leverage Monday to orchestrate and tie everything together for you. So let's talk a little bit about resource management. Well, resource management is one of those things where everyone has a slightly different definition. And what we want to talk about particular is what is it that resource management needs to actually solve. The first thing here is that resource management needs to solve the problem of multiple assignments to different projects. See, projects usually operate in silos. So if I have a resource that is on 3 separate projects, those 3 projects may have different project managers, and they all have different silo project plans. So Project A's project manager doesn't give a damn about Project B's tasks and needs. So if you have a resource that's tied to Project A and Project B, neither one is going to actually manage the entirety of the resource and how that resource is going to spend their time. And that in turn creates the problem of over and under allocation of resources, or the simple fact that we just don't even know who's available, right? That's the interesting problem of resource management. We want to have a top-down view cross projects from a portfolio perspective beyond just a single project. So an example here is poor Billy gets assigned to 3 projects, and he's got 100 hours between them because Project A goes, well, Billy, I need you for 40 hours. Project B goes, well, Billy, guess what? You need 40 hours. And Project C goes, please help me out, Billy. I just need you for 20 hours. That's all I need. Well, poor Billy there, with being always saying yes, he goes up and signs up for 100 hours of work. Well, just because Billy says, yeah, I can do 100 hours doesn't mean he has 100 hours of work. Right? Or from a budgetary perspective, just because I asked for $1 million for a budget request doesn't mean the company's going to give me $1 million. Right? So Billy, there is a demand on Billy. Billy's very popular, but poor Billy is also going to be stuck working 100 hours unless there's a way to see that Billy really is allocated for 100 hours. So what are the goals? Well, realistically, we want to be able to look at who is actually overloaded, who is underutilized, who is available. Those are the top 3 things, the table stakes of it. But realistically, if we go beyond that, and we may get a chance to talk a little bit about further as we go through a demo, is that we need to answer the question, okay, just because we allocated something, just because we signed something, did that actually happen? All right, so in the scenario of Billy got assigned 40 hours of work. And maybe it's to build a particular deliverable. He got assigned that work, he did the work. It turned out that Billy needed 60 hours to get that deliverable done. That happens all the time. Project plans change. Did that actually happen? Billy said, I worked 40 hours for you this week, but I didn't get it done. There's still 20 hours more work to do. What do you do in those scenarios? What is the workflow for you to adjust? This is where almost every project manager fails. You have to have a way to think about it and a way to manage such that we can adjust the plan to go, oh, we realize that Billy still has 20 hours of work to finish this task, even though he's already spent the 40 hours allocated to him and the 40 hours identified by the plan for him. Unfortunately, throughout history, all project managers kind of just sweep that under the table and go, Billy, just do the 20 hours separately. We're going to mark this one as done. So I had an old mentor. Actually, he was my old CEO for my old company. He always told me that in order for us to optimize something, we must have vocabulary to talk about it. If we don't have the vocabulary to talk about what we're trying to optimize, then we will never actually get the results we're looking for. So in this case, we want to define two concepts that are rudimentary and super important and always get confused one for the other when it comes to resource management. The concepts are task assignment and allocation. A task assignment is saying, okay, I have a demand, I have a task that needs someone to work on. So Billy, please work on this deliverable for 40 hours. That's your task assignment. Now here's the funny part about that is just because I have 40 hours worth of work for Billy to do, it doesn't mean Billy has 40 hours of time to do said work. Sometimes it's implied that it does, but in a scenario where we have shared resources like poor Billy here, it's not guaranteed. And that's where allocation comes in. So task assignment is about assigning the responsibility of getting the work done, whereas allocation is assigning the resource to get the work done. When we allocate Billy 40 hours to a particular task, then we're saying, Billy, you now have 40 hours to do a particular task beyond just you're assigned the task. So I can tell most customers, most people out there is probably sitting there going, I had a project manager like that just told me to get things done and never thought about, wait a minute, I don't have enough time in a day to make that happen. That's because the concept of task assignment and the concept of allocations are confused and mixed together all the time. So how do we solve this in Monday? Well, Monday actually has many different ways of solving this. Remember earlier I said that resource management is different for everybody. How people run their projects, how people do their project management oversight is different for every customer. And the definitions need to be established so that we would have the solution that works best for that customer. Monday, being the flexible software and platform that it is, allows us to be able to define a workflow that makes sense for the customer and how they do work. So in the world of resource management, we'll talk about two concepts. One, it's simple, which means that the task assignment and the allocation are implied and they're linked together. By assigning Billy a task of 40 hours, I'm also implicitly saying, Billy, you're allocated for 40 hours. Now, that's probably about 80% of how the world operates. They tie the two together. There's benefit to that in the sense that less overhead, less management process and all that stuff, but it does hide and obfuscate certain things, and we'll talk about that later. The inverse of that is the comprehensive solution, and the comprehensive solution is all about separating the concept of task assignment and resource allocation. In the comprehensive world, we're going to say, let's actually treat these two concepts as two different steps during a project management cycle. And what that means is because they're two different steps, there is an extra bit of overhead, but that extra bit of overhead allows us to have so much more dialogue in terms of how we want to utilize the task assignment and resource allocation and really optimize for what it is that we're working on, which is optimizing our resource utilization. Monday offers us multiple ways to do this. Let's first talk about the simple solution set where the resource allocation and the task assignment are tied together implicitly. And in that world, there's actually two possible ways we can do it. There's a manual and an automatic way. Out of the box, straight out from Monday solutions. So in a manual world, we're going to leverage connect boards and dashboards, and we're going to utilize the workload widget. So let's take a look at what this looks like in Monday. In the manual solution, what we'll need to have project plans, and we'll need to have a resource dashboard. So here I have a simple project plan we just call project 1. There are a few tasks assigned to it, there are some hours, and then there's a timeline associated with these tasks. So what we have here for project 1, I have task 1 that's assigned to John, myself, for 16 hours, September 12th to September 14th. And if you think about that, that's about 2 days, 8 hours a day. So I am implicitly assigned the task of task 1, and I am also busy for those 16 hours for those 2 days. Task 2 is assigned to Triet, and the same thing, 8 hours, September 15th. So if we were to go look at it on a resource dashboard now, where the task assignment is the allocation, what you'll have is a nice workload view that will cover multiple projects. So you see that John is assigned to task project 1 and project 3 for task 1 for the same week. John, myself, I have 16 hours for each week for both task 1s and 2 projects. So I have 32 hours of work for the week of September 11th. The beauty of the workload widget, and by the way, it is my favorite widget throughout all the various different widgets, is it allows us to see across a time distribution, a timeline of hours effort divided by the timeline by the resource. And by connecting it all together to multiple boards, it allows us to get the data from multiple projects so we can see cross projects. Going back to what the goals of resource management is, we are trying to look at the total utilization across projects, because projects are siloed. If I were to just look at project 1 over here, I wouldn't be able to know that, hey, John is busy on another project. If I was a project manager for project 1, I'm just going to sit there. Well, actually, that's a really bad example if you think about it, because I would be managed myself. But if someone else was a project manager for project 1, that someone else would not know that John is busy for 2 different projects. Because let's say, you know what, we're going to call Billy that project manager. Billy is only going to see, well, I need task 1 done for 16 hours. John, you're my man to get that done. But John might be busy. We won't be able to see that. Having the ability to see it cross projects allows us to be able to see, okay, John is busy, but it turns out it's okay. John's only got 32 hours that week. That's perfectly fine. Now, the reason why this is called the manual solution is because as new projects get introduced to the portfolio, you'd have to manually make sure that you manually add those projects into this dashboard. So let's go do that. So we have 3 projects right now. Project 1, Project 2, and Project 3, all various different allocations and assignments. Let's go ahead and create Project 4. So let me duplicate this board over here. We're going to do Project 4. And we will cheat and we'll just copy everything. And in Project 4, I'm going to load up a new person. Earlier, I saw that Tria only had 8 hours of work for the week of the 11th. So I know that Tria has some work, but it looks like Tria is fairly open. So I'm going to load up Tria. All right, so let me go to Project 4, and let me assign everything to Tria. So now, by me just doing that, I've assigned everything to Tria. Let me also just adjust the project dates just a little bit, just so that we have a slightly different view. So let's say this project is actually going to start on the week of the 18th instead. All right? And the beauty of all this is, take a look. Just because I changed that in the dependencies, project plan dates shuffle around. One of the fantastic things about Monday. The automations, the integration, everything just kind of works together. So now Triet has a plan. We have a plan for Triet. He's going to be relatively busy. Let's go take a look at what it looks like in a resource board. Huh. Interesting. We don't see anything new with Triet. Triet still looks like he's not busy. What's going on here? Well, remember earlier I called this the manual solution because we have to manually connect that new project into this resource. And for most customers, this is probably fine. If you're not dealing with hundreds of projects, you're probably fine managing this. Now, there are some other limitations, like I believe there is a 60 board limit for the maximum number of boards you can connect to a dashboard. So you can use the solution up to about 60 projects. So let's go ahead and connect project 4 into this and hit done. And it will just take a moment to refresh with the new data. It has to recalculate and do all that fun stuff when it comes to dealing with new data. Now that the widget has redrawn, we can see project 4 added a lot more hours. Now Triet's got a lot of work on the week of the 18th. Why? Well, because number one, remember we shifted project 4 to start on the week of the 18th, and the first 2 steps were 32 hours. So we added 32 hours on top of Triet's workload in project 4. And you can see that in the various different tasks in project 4. Task 1, there are 16 hours, and task 2, there's another 8 hours. And then on top of that, you got task 3, there's 2 hours. So you can see how it just distributed all the work for project 4 for Triet across the board. So this is a manual process. You have to keep track of which projects you have that you're managing to. As time goes on, you have to disconnect your older projects and add your newer projects in. You got about 60 slots to work with for a connected dashboard. But for a simplistic solution and a manual management solution, this is perfectly fine. And this will serve you well in terms of just being able to see where everything's at. So earlier, I said that there's also an automated solution. And the automated solution is a different way to get us the same thing. Now let's talk about the automated solution. The automated solution is really the same thing, same results, but it eliminates a couple extra steps and eliminates a particular limitation, that 60 board limitation. So what is an automated solution? Well, it is trying to still get us literally the same thing, a workload widget, but the difference is what we're going to do here is we're going to actually leverage a webhook API call. So on every project board, we will establish a webhook that Axanexa can build for you guys that will copy over any assignment data into a centralized board instead. And by doing that, what happens is that board now gets a collation of all the data of those assignments, and that in turn allows us to create a workload widget based off that centralized data. It's the same concept as the dashboard, but this is doing it as you assign, collating into a central place. So it gives you a more automated approach, and it eliminates the 60 board limits. So let's take a look at what that looks like. The automated solution effect is very similar to the manual solution. The only major difference is we don't leverage a dashboard. What we leverage is a landing board, a resource board whose job is to collate the data of the assignments from various different projects. So in this case, here's the resource board we have, and you see the allocations, the assignments from various different projects. And when I say, let's take a look at the resource board, we have the ability to see the representation from the various different projects for various different assignments and so forth. So that is really just it in terms of what the automated is. Now, how is it automated? Well, it's automated because the data is collected from a webhook. So in this case, what happens is in our project template, we actually have a webhook connected that says when any column changes, send a webhook. So what's happening is there is a program behind the scene that's watching every change that's happening on this board. And anytime a assignment change occurs, an entry gets created inside that resource board where all the data lands in and we collate all the information. Now, if there are things that are changed for an item that we don't care about, say if you change the name of an item, that's okay. We don't really care about that. So it just gets ignored. But this webhook's job is to just keep a constant lookout for anything that changes relative to resource assignment, and that in turn will allow us to then create and generate that resource board. Now, because this right here is in the template, there is no need to manually connect the data. So let's take a look. Let's actually go ahead and create project 5 now. So same thing as before. We're going to duplicate this board. And we're going to do project 5. So I have created project 5 from this duplication over here. And let's assign, just like what we did earlier, let's assign triad to everything. And let's go ahead and move the date, just like we did earlier, to the week of the 18th. All right, so now we have done all that. What's going to be interesting is that all that data is going to be sent over to the resource board. Earlier, we went over to the resource board, and we didn't have project 5. Let's take a look at this. Project 5 data is in the resource board now. I didn't have to connect anything. It just worked automatically. That is the beauty of the power of APIs and webhooks. By always watching, by being part of the template, that webhook knows, oh, I am interested in all projects created from my template. And as a result, anytime a new project is created from that template, that information gets collated and automatically put into the resource board. Like I said, the beauty of this, no extra manual steps, and we don't have the problem of the 60 board limitation. There is a cost in the automated solution. You will need us to help you build a webhook that will listen to your transactions and then upkeep to your resource board. So there is some cost associated with that. The manual solution, it's delivered out of the box from Monday. You can do yourself. If you need help, Axanexa can help you. That is the workload resource management. The automated and the manual solution gets you the same result. You have the ability to see who's on first, what's on second. And because of the way that it dynamically generates the data spread across a time period, we're able to see who's available. And that in turn allows us to be able to manage and optimize our resources. I really loved this solution that Monday has provided us. It is used in so many different instances. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be people. We can use this to schedule equipment. We could use this to schedule rooms. These are all kinds, anything where it's a shared resource, we can leverage this technology to make it work. So earlier I said that there is a comprehensive solution. The simplistic solution that I spoke about thus far has been we tie task assignment and resource allocation together. And that means those things are implicitly tied and represented in the system. In a comprehensive solution, we seek to divorce those two concepts apart. By divorcing them, we would require two ways to represent a task assignment and a way to represent a resource allocation. To do that, we have to introduce a new capability, in which case Axanexa provides a resource management app. Its entire job is to allow us to just manage resource allocations, separated from the task assignments. And by having that, it opens up the door for a number of various different workflows that otherwise would not be available through standard project management practices. All right, so let's take a quick peek at the demo of what our application can offer you guys. All right, so resource management app over here. This is a comprehensive view of all resources and what are they allocated to. So across the top over here, you see that we have dates on a weekly basis and how many hours were allocated. I want to note, it is not to tasks. It is just to projects. We are allocating triad 15 hours to the internal project R&D. And over here on the left-hand side, we have attributes about the projects, about tree its title, role, functions, the project timeline, and so forth. These are all information about tree it and the project, but over here on the right, it's a scrolling timeline that we can see for 13 weeks. And if we need to go further 13 weeks, we have the ability to jump to the next 13 weeks. And you can see over here, we just jumped. We're going to go back over here. I do want to point out, like I said, this is just allocation, not two specific tasks, because we divorced the two apart. We're going to leverage the workload widget to still talk about task assignment, but we have a resource widget to talk about allocations now. So by having this resource widget separated out, what happens is you still manage things from a workflow perspective or a workload perspective. So let's take a look at what does that workflow look like now. So let's say I'm the manager for project 1, Billy. All right, so we'll say Billy is project manager for project 1. We have our standard task. It looks similar because it's the same template. We have hours, task, assignments. Now what happens here is, interesting enough, these hours are estimates of how much it takes for task 1 to get done. And when I say, hey, 20 hours for, in this case, Mike, between the week of October 2nd, he has 20 hours to get it done. That's a demand signal. That is not the full assignment. What that means is I can now say, looking at my workload widget, this is going to look very familiar. What is the need on Mike for that week? I need 20 hours. So I am project 1, and I need 20 hours for Mike. Then I come over to my resource tool over here. Same project, remember, same project 1, same layout. And under Mike, for project 1, for the week of the 2nd, so actually let's go back to the week of the 2nd. All right, so for the week of the 2nd, I need 20 hours from Mike. So what I'm doing here is I'm effectively saying, Mike, that my project plan said Mike needs 20 hours this week. I'm going to allocate 20 hours for Mike for project 1. Now, this is the first time we get to see cross-project, because in this one view, under Mike, I actually have project 1 and project 2 available. On top of that, I also have holiday, unavailable, out of office, and any management overhead that we want to have. Here's the funny thing about life. Just because I'm assigned to a project doesn't mean my life stops. I still have to answer emails. I still have to answer Slack. My wife's still going to call me, right? Those are life tasks that need to still happen. And we provided a place for us to establish Mike has a management overhead of some sort, administrative overhead. And we're saying Mike has 8 hours of administrative overhead. Warning, Will Robinson, we have 48 hours allocated to Mike. And this may be fine relative to Billy's perspective for project 1. Billy's going to say, you know what, I need Mike for 20 hours. So I'm going to put in Mike for 20 hours for project 1 for the week of the 2nd. And that'll work just fine. Project 2 is project 2's problem. But Mike, I'm going to put in for project 2 for project 1 for 20 hours. Now let's do the same thing. All right, we're going to say that project 2's project manager is going to be Dan. Dan has Mike as well for project 2 under resource assignment. Mike is assigned the same resource, similar timeline, and so forth. All right, so when I go look at my workload, well, I need 20 hours for project 2 as well. So Dan's sitting there going, well, I need to ask for 20 hours for project 2. So I come over to my resource tool over here, and I go and say, hey, here's my Mike. And, let's go back to that week. And I'm going to put in my 20 hours for project 2 over here. So now I have a problem. Mike has 48 hours. But Dan says, not my problem. Billy needs to deal with that. Billy asks for too much time. I need my 20 hours. This is where the separation of the two comes into play. We have another workflow that we can do. So on Tuesday morning, we have our PMO stand-up where we're going to review where everything's at, where all the resources are at. By separating the task demand with the allocation, we can just talk about allocation without talking about task demand. And we're looking at it and we're going, hey, for this week that we're talking about, Mike is overloaded by 48 hours. What's going on? Well, let's open it up. It looks like Project 1 is asking for 20 hours, and Project 2 is asking for 20 hours. Here's the problem. There isn't 20 hours to give. Someone's got to give. There's a total of 40 hours allocated, and we say no more than 40 for Mike because we need to make sure Mike gets to go home. So for 48 hours, we need to cut 8 hours somewhere. And Project 1, Billy, and Project 2, Dan, will talk to each other. They'll negotiate, and Billy says, you know what? I'll give you the 8 hours. All right, I will reduce my workload for 8 hours. I'll give you, Dan, 8 hours, but I need 8 hours next week. You good with that? Everyone's happy. Everyone negotiates. Let's go and update this. All right, so we'll go ahead and say that, all right, I'm no longer asking for 20 hours from Mike. I'm asking for 12 hours from Mike. But I'm going to ask for 23 hours for next week instead of 15 hours. So I'm moving my hours over to that. And correspondingly, now we go, oh, crap, Mike's busy at 46 hours. Well, Billy just gave up 8 hours for the first week. Dan, it's your turn to shuffle around things for me, right? So Dan's going to reduce his time. He needs to reduce by 6 hours. So Dan gets 9 hours over here. And then we go into week 3, and then we go, oh, crap, there's 58 hours. For the purpose of demonstration, let's stop it at week 2. But we can have this conversation, and you can see how having this fruitful conversation of just separating the allocation from the assignment. We're not talking about what Mike is doing with the time. We're just saying we need Mike for this much time. And the project managers and the PMO can all discuss how do we leverage Mike. That separation allows us to be able to manage this. Okay, so we have this saved. This is done. Now, Billy has to go back and go, damn, now I got to readjust my project plan. Dan doesn't have to do anything because Dan's got his 20 hours. So Billy goes back and says, let me go to Project 1 here. So I'm Billy. I'm going to go to Project 1. I know I just gave up 8 hours for the week of the 2nd. So I go and say, well, I need to move this. Here's the thing. Just because I gave 8 hours doesn't mean the work got 8 hours less. It's still 20 hours of work that still needs to get done. But I get to update my project plan independent of the allocation now. I look at it and I go, interesting. Well, 20 hours of work, rather than from the 2nd to the 7th, let's make it from the 2nd to the 13th instead. All right, what does that look like for me for workload? That looks like, well, it's no longer 20, it's 10 hours. And now the next week, I only need 10 hours. It works out. All right, so we now have the ability to separate the task assignment from the allocation. This round trip allows us to be able to manage a project plan. And here's the thing, it allows us to make it reflect reality. Because here's another potential use case. Let's say that Mike didn't get his work done. His original 20-hour effort needed more time. Well, maybe after this week, we go, oh, crap, we need another 10 more hours. Well, we can put that up there, and we can then look at the workload again, look at these numbers, and then assign the allocation accordingly to make that happen. So we have this divorcing of the project plan, the task assignment, and the resource allocation. That gives us the optimized result that we're looking for. Now, there's another use case that's really interesting. Us humans, we like to allocate people by shifts. So it's not that we're going to look at a project plan and allocate people to that project plan. It's the inverse. Right? So you know what? I have I'm assigning hours to people. So think of anything that's part-time job related, where we're gonna say, you're gonna get 30 hours this week, you're gonna get 20 hours this week, you're gonna get 4 hours a week from Mike for the next 20 weeks. That's usually what actually happens in reality. When we're talking about the use cases, the person gets allocated, the resource gets allocated long before the project plan ever gets created. So by divorcing that, what we can actually do is we can first allocate the projects and then come back and make the project plan fit. So net, going back to our presentation here, summary, we have multiple ways of doing resource management. That is the thing that I want to highlight. So many different ways of resource management. We have the flexibility to meet your way of working. You may be a simplistic method, you may be a comprehensive method. Comprehensive method gives you a lot more flexibility and a lot more workflows, but it does introduce more steps in your project management. And ultimately, at the end of the day, any of these solutions that we talked about, we can deploy into any existing project management infrastructure already. That is the beauty of this. Everything we talked about is just an add-on to however it is that you do project management today. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me in my masterclass. Thank you, Monday, for having me. If you guys have any questions about resource management or just anything in general about Monday, remember we are Axanexa. You can always find us on the internet at axanexa.com. We are a Monday partner. If you need to really look for us, we're also in the partner registry. So anything you need from Monday, reach out to us. We are your best friend. And see you in the Monday universe.